Welcome everybody. So this morning I wanted to talk about turnover, and I labeled the subject "Taking Control of Turnover." I've waffled with the title on this thing. I think I'm going to switch it over to "Embracing the Suck of Turnover" because turnover stinks. We hate it. It feels like a new pain every time it happens, and I feel like we're recreating the wheel every time it happens. And I just want to put an end to that cycle if we can. So I've got some slides. I'm going to bring up some slides for us to take a look at this morning, just to have in the background while we have this conversation. So bear with me a second. There we go. So the reason this topic became so important is because when managing a sales force, when overseeing a sales force, there's material impact to how turnover impacts the business. And I saw it in real time. There were times where when a branch manager would turn over or a salesperson would turn over, we'd go months, sometimes a year or more, with just huge gaps in the business. And it felt like we were recreating the wheel every time. And what was worse was tribal knowledge was walking out the door. We had people that took leads with them, and it was just a bad place to be. And so I thought, well, how do we actually impact turnover? What is it that we can be doing so that we can put an end to this vicious cycle? Well, what I started to realize through research is the vicious cycle wasn't just impacting the company that I worked for at the time or companies today. It's everybody. And so through the research, I was shocked to find out that the average salesperson only lasts 18 to 20 months in a company. Now that might be, you might be doing better than that, or you might be doing worse than that, but that's average across all of the sales function, according to HubSpot. The average position takes 6.2 months to fill. And then this other stat was pretty shocking. 44% of reps have plans to leave their current job, according to Deloitte. So I'm thinking to myself, well, that means almost half of my sales force is already thinking about what's next. And they're not thinking about what's next with me. They're thinking about potentially what's next with somebody else. So I started having some angst. This is one of those things that keep you up at night. Well, naturally, organizations have metrics. They have metrics in how they manage turnover. And I'm sure that if there are business owners or CEOs on the call, that somewhere in your book of metrics, you have retention as part of that, as part of one of those measures. Well, what I want to talk about today is I'm not sure that that's a good metric anymore. I'm not sure that that's something that we actually have control of. I believe that metrics should be things that we have reasonable control of so that we can impact them. And I think the world has changed to the point where we no longer have control over the retention metric. We are going into a space where people are going to turn over more frequently. And rather than spin our wheels and try to think about how we can impact a metric that we have very little to no control over, I started thinking about, well, what is it that we do have control over? How is it that we can get our arms around this turnover problem and somehow be successful? So again, reached out to the experts. Here's a summary of everything that I read online and everything that I've been advised to do to help impact turnover. Better employee engagement, of course, pay more, have a good culture, treat people well, have perks, and occasionally bring pizza to the office. So I'm sure you've heard some of these on some level. I'm telling you, you have to do this stuff. This is table stakes. This isn't a cure for the problem. This isn't the solution to the problem. This is just to get in the game. If you're not doing this, you're out of touch, right? So, okay, we've done this. What is it we can do? What is it that we need to do? So we reach out to our team and we say, hey, team, give me some ideas. What is it that we can do to get this turnover metric down or this retention metric better? And of course, the COO says, well, let's measure it. What gets measured gets done. HR is like, hey, let's do a pulse survey. Let's reach out to the field and do a focus group. Frank, the janitor, says, hey, let's put in a beer tap in the break room so we can have that with the pizza. Not a bad idea. We might do that. Everyone's got their own opinion on how to impact this turnover metric. Here's what I believe now, though. I don't think we can control it. I believe that turnover is out of our control. I believe it's just something that happens now. Gone are the days where we're going to find resumes with 10-year histories. in a single role. I think we're going to find lots of 2-year blocks, especially in staffing around our branch manager roles, recruiter roles, and salesperson roles. So I'm thinking, okay, well, what we have to do then is understand why the turnover happens. And what if instead of being a victim to turnover, we started to predict it? We started to be okay with it and predict it and understand when it was going to happen. That's a key thing. We have to understand about when it's going to happen. Now, I'm not saying that you should encourage turnover. I'm not saying that turnover is a good thing. If you can keep people longer than the stats show they're currently staying, great. You win the game. But if you can't, then what do we have to do to get ready for it? How do we anticipate it? How do we understand it? How do we make sure that we're able to function despite the turnover? Because really, at the end of the day, it's our job to keep the results stable, the culture stable, even if the people aren't. That's not an excuse for disruption of the business. As leaders, as executives, we don't get a pass just because turnover is up. We still have to keep the results coming. We still have to keep the culture stable. So we should focus on one objective that we have really great control over. I'm going to tell you what it is. I would love to get your feedback on it. Here's what I think. I think instead of focusing on the back end when folks are turning over, we focus on the front end and we start to really hone in on this thing we call time to productivity. So we define, so you might be wondering, well, what is time to productivity? Time to productivity is the moment from the day a person starts to the other moment where they're completely responsible for their job and their results. That means that they're in a position where they say, I own it. I understand how to do it, and I'm actually doing the job. So there is a whole variance of time to productivity lines in different organizations based on role. What I mean by that is, for example, when a new person starts in an organization, a branch manager, let's say, across staffing. By the way, we did a time to productivity survey, some time to productivity research to get some actual stats in staffing. And so what we found was when a branch manager starts in a new role, the average time to productivity for a branch manager is about 6 months. 6 months. So from the day they start to the time that they feel like I am completely responsible for my own actions and I'm actually doing the job, able to produce results, it's about 6 months. I don't know if that's a long time. That's kind of up to you whether that's a long time. Salespeople, if I look at salespeople, the average time to productivity from a new salesperson walking in the door on day one to the time that they feel fully responsible and are doing their job, about 5 months. It's just shy of 5 months. So we started to look at, through the research, we started to look at, well, what impacts that time to productivity? So how are they trained? How are they mentored? What did their boss think and do during that time? What time of year were they hired? And then also, what did that look like long-term as far as the overall impact they were able to make in their job and to the organization? So we looked at the results over time based on all of this criteria for the time to productivity research. I'm gonna spare you all of the detail. There's some really fascinating detail that came out of this, like best time of year to hire, a couple of gaps in training process, the overall impact of training on people and whether or not they completed it. I'd be happy to share that with you if you want to reach out to me at some point. But here's a couple of nuggets. When we reduce time to productivity, if we're able to take the existing time to productivity measures, and I'm going to focus on the salesperson because sales is that's our jam. Sales is our wheelhouse. So I'm going to focus on the salesperson. If we're able to reduce that 5-month time to productivity down, if we're able to get that, let's say we get it down to 60 or 90 days, well, number one, we get the revenue engine churning faster. Well, if that same sales rep then only spends 2 years with us, if they were only going to spend 2 years with us anyway, then the trajectory of that sales or their production starts earlier and goes higher, frankly. So over time, what we saw that sales reps that had a more intense time to productivity period and had that time to productivity period shrunk produced 7% higher sales growth than the average sales rep. 7% higher. I don't know what that equates to for dollars for your business, but I think there are a lot of staffing companies out there that would give up a lot to have 7% higher sales growth right now. 11% higher gross margin growth. So that intense focus in the time to productivity window and reducing that window, concentrating it, controlling it, led to higher gross margin dollar growth across the board. So not only were they bringing in higher dollars, but they were selling deals at higher gross margins. Who wouldn't want that, right? So here's what it looks like in a picture. I'm a picture guy. I like to have a picture to kind of get my head around the concept. So what we're saying is, hey, we've got this average window of sales reps that they're going to last somewhere between 18 to 20 months. And again, I'm not trying to call doomsday here. If you can get your sales reps to last 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, then you win. That's great. But stats tell us that that's not going to be the norm. We're going to have to get used to a shorter timeline for some of these roles. So current time to productivity across staffing says it takes about 5 months for a sales rep to get up to full productivity. I believe the new metric to measure beyond turnover is how do we get people to productivity faster? How do we reduce the time to new productivity? Now, it's kind of up to you in the organization how condensed you can get that. But if we're at 5 months now, if you benchmark it, you're at 5 months now and you can get it down to 4, great. 3, better. 2, awesome. It's our job as leaders to figure out how we can adjust the systems so that we can start to shrink that time to productivity down. And ultimately, that turns into a revenue period. We get an ROI on concentrating that time to productivity. Now, the reason I call this an ROI period is because it's going to cost. We're going to have to apply resources to it. In order to shrink time to productivity, you've got to do a couple things. There's got to be some organizational readiness for you to make that period concentrated and effective. And I'm going to tell you what those are. Good news. That's part of the presentation. I'm going to put a few things out here for you to be thinking about that you can impact. So we're going to talk this strategically, and we're getting ready to go into the actual tactics next. So here are the 4 things that I would recommend that you start thinking about doing to impact your time to productivity and shrink that window. 1 is the W model process. I'll share that with you in just a second. Number 2 is, this was loud and clear from the research that we did, is a hotline or a mentor. Training, have a good solid training protocol. Now that might seem like duh, but I'm going to give you 2 parts to that training protocol, one of which a lot of organizations miss. So you might want to jot some notes down for that. And then last but not least is this organizational readiness, and we'll talk through that. So let me show you what I mean. The number 1 is this W model process. This is something that's unique to WinSource. We use this W model for lots of things. It's but I've got it centered around the onboarding process here. And let me just walk you through it quickly. However you have your onboarding structured, let's assume that you have it structured over the course of 30 days. When I think about the initial mission of people coming on board, the first and foremost thing to do is get them to fall in love with the company. So that does not mean you plop them down in front of your learning system or your IT system and have them do a whole bunch of online learning. That's the opposite of getting people to fall in love with the organization. If you showed up to a first date with someone hoping to kindle a relationship and they whipped out bank statements and started doing their bills, you'd be like, oh my gosh, this is awful. So I'm encouraging you to think about kicking off the relationship well and getting people to fall in love with your organization. That means showing them the heartbeat, bringing them to the building, introducing them to customers, letting them talk to your top performers. All the things that are going to make an initial connection with those people that are starting out. Then intense focus on how their role contributes and how they personally are going to contribute to the organization and its mission. Then we let them out in the field, application of skill and knowledge. This is arm 3 of the W. This is where they're out in the field actually practicing the job so that somebody can see them doing it. And then arm 4 is performance coaching. So I don't have timelines assigned to this. That's kind of up to you. 30-day programs are common, 60-day programs are common. But in general, this is the type of flow that your training program should follow. Number 2. The mentor or hotline. So when we did this study for time to productivity, we asked people, what was the number 1 thing that led to your success? The number 1 thing that contributed to you being productive in your role? And a resounding cry was I needed to have somebody to call when I had a question. That was it. Now, some organizations are going to call that a mentor, and you might have a mentor program. That's great if you do. But what I heard loud and clear through the research was my questions are immediate, and the best thing you can do to help me out is to put somebody on the other end of the phone when I have a question. So what I would encourage you to do is identify people in your organization that can be on the other end of that hotline. Again, if you're the size organization that can have a mentor program, that's great. Put one in place. Something to consider, though, when you do have mentors is it should not be your rainmaker. It should not be your top performers. It should be someone who's average, but also a good teacher and very patient, and who's someone whose business can support having a little bit of distraction, frankly, because training someone new is a bit of a distraction. You're dedicating some time in your day to that individual. The other thing that I would consider is your process book, your SOPs, your best practice books. Those aren't for your new person. Don't plop them down in front of those books. Those are for your mentors. Those are for the people that are doing the training. So I shudder to think of handing off an SOP document to someone and saying, just read this and tell me when you're done. That does virtually nothing, according to our research. The third thing is this thing we refer to as the training protocol, and I stole this from my time in the Army. The Army training protocol was tell me, show me, let me, coach me. Tell me, show me, let me, coach me. Sounds pretty logical. Tell me what to do, show it to me in real time, let me try it, and then give me some coaching. Super effective method. Here's the problem, though. In an effort to cut down the time and cost of training, many organizations have resigned themselves to the tell me, show me part. So we do really well with training books, systems, videos, online training. We may even have YouTube videos. And we forget about the let me coach me part, which is the application. That's where the behavior, the muscle memory of the job gets rooted in my head. And through that is role plays, one-to-ones, being customer facing, getting in the field, answering the phone. I am a huge proponent of people getting on the phone and meeting customers as soon as they can, because I think it's the best part of the job, and it's the thing that's the most important thing. So the takeaway from the section 3 is add the let me coach me. If you don't have the let me coach me, make sure you have people and resources dedicated to ensuring that happens when you bring new people on. It's critical to reducing that time to productivity. I have a friend that I used to work with that threw this quote out all the time. I don't know if he's here on the call today, but a little ode to Wayne. Wayne, thanks for giving me this quote. The only thing worse than training people and losing them is not training them and keeping them. The investment you make up front is the thing that's going to change the trajectory of how people operate in the environment. And the last bit of advice that I would give you is organizational readiness. One, when you're training, train with people. We learn better when we can glean stuff from people. If you can possibly put people in a person-to-person environment, that's what they tell us was one of the most impactful things to their training. Make sure that the hiring manager is present. I can't tell you how many times I hear someone say, hey, I've got a new person starting on Monday, but I'm getting ready to go on vacation. Can you watch over them? That's just a horrible situation. It sends the wrong message. Make sure you're there to greet the person. You can't get them to fall in love with you if you've left for vacation or you're on a business trip. I would rather see you put that time off, like bump them out a week so that you can be present and welcome them to the organization. It will have a positive impact on the time to productivity. Be clear on objectives. Everyone wants to know how to win. And win fast, lose fast. What I mean by that is if you start getting through time to productivity and you're not feeling it and they're not feeling it, it's okay to shake hands and part ways. Don't be afraid to let somebody go early if your gut tells you that that's the right thing to do. And then make sure we're all aligned so that we're in the right place at the right time and we've got the right resources for people. So here's what I would recommend. This is you're thinking about this strategically, this concept strategically. This is the Fresh Ideas Summit. I hope you found this a fresh idea. I would say turnover's here to stay. Turnover is not something that I feel executives or organizations are going to have that much control over in the future. So what can we measure? We can measure time to productivity. We can get our arms around that. We can change people's trajectory. We can make people more comfortable. We can make them more successful if we put intense focus on it. It's the one metric we really can control. It's our job to keep the culture and results stable. The things that I would recommend you do, the W model, have people fall in love with your organization, get clear and get them out in the field, and then get them coaching. Make sure you've established some kind of hotline or mentor program. Ensure your training program is tell me, show me, let me, coach me. We've got to do all 4 parts of that. We've got to ensure that we're doing the one-to-one and actual hands-on application. And then make sure your organization's ready and that you're aligned and that you've got clear metrics. And at the end of the day, have some fun with it. So I'm welcome to take some questions if anybody has any.
Thanks so much, Mark. We'll watch questions come in. I know I had some. So at the end there, you talked about, remote. If you're remote, that doesn't mean training has to be. What if you can't because you're physically a long way away and it's not practical to bring somebody in for an extended period of time? How do you deal with it?
Yeah, I would challenge the not practical part, right? So listen, what does turnover cost? What does turnover cost? I don't know. It's different for every organization. So if we said, hey, we're going to dedicate an extra $1,500 or $2,000 to fly somebody to be with one of our better salespeople and have them shadow side by side, is it that big of a material impact to do that compared to the cost of turnover? I don't know. Now, being pragmatic though, if you absolutely can't get that person somewhere else, you can't get them to be physically in the same space with someone else, understand, then that means you need a dedicated resource, like dedicated time slots and dedicated training times and dedicated Zoom meetings with customers. Like I would have that scripted out minute to minute over the course of the first 30 days so that that person felt welcomed and that their calendar was full. Because remember, when someone starts a job, that's the honeymoon period. So when someone starts, I want them overwhelmed with time so that as they start to fill in their own schedule, they've got a feeling of what it's supposed to feel like. You're supposed to feel a little pressure when you have your calendar going, right? Especially as a salesperson.
Absolutely.
Yep.
You also mentioned that the playbook is not for the new hire, that it's for the mentor.
Yeah.
Do you find that the mentor, who's a good teacher, who's experienced in what you do, doesn't look at the playbook when they're doing their training?
Well, that's the whole point of that comment, right? So, hey, listen, reading the playbook for the newbie is fine. They'll get something out of it, but it's really about the mentor. So I've seen a bunch of mentors that are just really good at their job, but they're really good at their job by muscle memory. They don't know why or what they're actually doing by SOP. And so what they end up teaching the new person is instead of a nice square box, they kind of shave the corners a little bit. Like, let me show you how I do this. And while that might be good from an efficiency standpoint, it becomes challenging from a brand standpoint or replicating a standard process standpoint. And so I believe that those mentors need to get some dedicated time. Like you got to train your mentors and prep your mentors with that SOP or playbook, so that they know how to teach the new people coming in.
I had a related question come in. How are mentors and managers held accountable to the new hire's success?
Yeah. So I think if you've got a mentor program, this is just dreaming here. It may not be practical from a finance standpoint, but wouldn't it be great if the mentor had a vested interest in that person's success, like a spiff or something for milestones that they hit? That would certainly change things. And then the person that owns the relationship is the hiring manager. That's the person who's ultimately, if I'm the hiring manager, I want my mentor to do the best possible job so that I can coach that person to effectiveness and I don't have to worry about changing poor or bad behavior. So I've got a vested interest in working with both the mentor and the new hire through that onboarding process as the hiring manager.
Love that. And by the way, I'm going to let you in a little secret. I know this presentation is hitting home because some of the questions I'm getting are coming to me as direct messages from my co-CEO, Vicky. So you really hit home with this presentation. And one of the questions she asked is, beyond job skills training, what else do you focus on during onboarding to get employees fully immersed in the culture?
So like I said, that first period of fall in love with the organization, that's time to steep them in your mission, vision, values. We heard in the last presentation about the why of things. Tell them your why. Get them in there. Get them some FaceTime with the founders or the high-level executives. Get out to the best customers and find out how we impact their business, so that you're pulling on those heartstrings to say, this is what we do. This is the difference we make in the world. This is how we add to the workforce at large. And when you do that, you're connecting to not only the bigger mission, but you're creating a feeling of the culture. Get them to talk to people that have had great success in the organization. One of the things that I do for onboarding is I will often give people a list of folks to call and just have them walk through that list. And the conversations that come as a result of that are amazing. There's lifelong friends that are built through that, because it's a bit more casual. It's not really scripted, no agenda.
All right. And one last question. You talked about tell me, show me, let me, coach me.
Yeah.
At the let me phase, how deep are you throwing them into the deep end? Is it wade into the pool or is it jump in?
Depends on how ready they are. I'm a fan of just let them go, let them try it. But it depends on how comfortable. Number one, how comfortable they are, and two, how well they've been trained. I'll never put somebody in a bad situation where they're going to fail. I don't mind a white knuckle call from time to time, though. Putting somebody, let's see what happens. So it's kind of up to you, but it's also based on how confident you are in the tell me, show me that's happened prior to that.
Fantastic. Well, I want to thank you very much. We're at our time. I think there's one question for you in the Q&A if you want to jump in there. Otherwise, thanks for the time. Great content. Again, this is all recorded. We'll be getting the recordings up next week. So if you missed something because you weren't active listening enough in Mark's presentation, you'll be able to rewatch next week. So thank you very much, Mark.
Have a great day, folks.